But ultimately we wanted to move ahead. We don't want to just settle with the possible cost factor. We wanted to figure out the potential cost factor. Been contributed to the problem to a major extent. So possible factor now is narrowed down to potential factor. How do you do it? Again, use your Pareto, or use an impact control matrix, or you use a cause and effect matrix. So these are nothing but prioritization tool. We only wanted to know what is number one and what is number two and what is number three. That is, we are looking at an ordinal data, not just a nominal data. When you have a list of all possible X factor, your data is just in the form of nominal data. I want to convert my nominal data into an ordinal data by doing some prioritization. Either I will put all my experience and energy, or I will consult the experts, I will involve the stakeholder. Ultimately, I will order my X variable. So the kind of variable that can appear on the top are nothing but the potential factor. This is what your Pareto is doing. Hope all of you agree with me, right? The vital few factor versus the trivial many will appear on top of others. But in order to plot the Pareto, you require some numbers against each X variable, because your X-axis is the attribute data, nothing but the different types of X variable, and Y-axis will be the impact, maybe in terms of a number or a score out of 10. You can have a brainstorming and then you can plot the Pareto. So you get the potential factor, and then it's still not sufficient. We now understood that, okay, these factors could be potential, but then whether these factors are really the critical or really the criticality depends on the percentage contribution. The criticality depends on percentage contribution, and then the relationship between the potential factor and your response variable. What are the two things? One is the percentage contribution to the problem. To what extent I contribute to the problem? To what extent you contribute to the problem? And you are an X variable and I am an X variable. I am responsible for 90% of the problem and you are responsible for 10% of the problem. And now which is critical? So my contribution is critical, right? So I understand, the both factors are having a relationship, but one of the factor is contributing heavily. So this factor can now be clearly categorized as root cause. This factor now can be clearly categorized as root cause. You know why? We understood this factor has got a relationship. We also understood this factor has got a considerable contribution, right, to the problem. And now I will optimize the root cause. I now will optimize the root cause or the critical factor. And so my problem with respect to the Y variable comes down, right? So how to validate the criticality, and then how to understand the contribution. In order to validate the criticality, you need to use a tool called hypothesis testing. You need to use a tool called hypothesis testing. It is simply validation of a claim. It is simply validation of a claim. Claim comes from the brainstorming discussion. Claim comes from the cause and effect diagram discussion, or claim might come from the expert's opinion, or it can come from the combination of all these discussions. So now you have the claim, and then Pareto is plotted, and then you now suspect about 3 to 5 variables. And now for each and every variable out of the 5 needs to be validated for its criticality and for its contribution. For criticality, you have several testing. That is what I am going to introduce now. And then to understand the contribution, you always have correlation and regression analysis. Now, do you all understand why we must learn hypothesis testing and why we must learn the correlation and regression analysis. If that is known, you can master those tools and then you can use it in your project, right? You can always you will be able to draw a clear boundary between a claim and the fact. Claim is different, fact is different. Anybody can say anything. You don't have to believe everything. He may be an expert or he may be a boss, but he will say this is the culprit. But you don't have to believe. You can always verify it and get it validated. If it gets validated according to the statistical procedure you are going to learn, then the claim is a fact. Otherwise, the claim remains a claim. You don't have to react. You don't have to make any changes. So this is what we are going to master now. Step number 8, identification and validation of critical factor. Shall we go for it? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, introduction and the selection of hypothesis testing. And then all the calculation part will be taught by Dr. R.K. to you. And I also wanted to discuss few more lean tools with you. And I'll see whether I can do it in the morning itself. So I'll be sharing my screen. So can you please confirm that my screen is properly visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
So this is the important module, right? You are here in the black belt training program only for this module, in my opinion, because all other things are just the tools which you might be already using. This tool you're using, but then unknowingly, and hereafter you will be able to use these tools consciously. So what is hypothesis testing? And then how to select a particular type of hypothesis testing for a situation in your project. So what is an hypothesis testing? What is null hypothesis? What is alternate hypothesis? What is alpha, which is nothing but level of significance? And then what is p-value, which is nothing but probability of significance, right? Alpha, level of significance, p-value, probability of significance. And then there is sampling risk and sampling error. In the measure phase, we were concerned about the measurement error. Now we are worried about the sampling error. You know why? Measurement error, we already corrected in the measure phase. But still we are again proceeding to collect the data. Now, over and above the measurement error, what can now disturb our data? The sampling error. So sampling comes with some risk. Though it saves money, it saves our energy, it gives us quick information about the population, it comes with the risk. Because there is a risk associated, there will be an error. Right? Because there is a risk associated, there will be an error. So we are going to fix this risk and then estimate the error. And we'll see to that the error is under control. Right? And when you fix the risk, that is called alpha. When you fix the risk, that is called alpha. When you estimate the error, it can be your p-value or it can be your type 2 error, right? There are two things. When you estimate the error, that can be type 1 error or that can be type 2 error. The estimated value of type 1 error is called the p-value. We'll be discussing that. And then we'll move on to selection of hypothesis testing. There are so many hypothesis testing. We know there are two things. One is parameter, another one is statistics. Can somebody help me differentiate the parameters and the statistics? What is a parameter and what is Yeah, statistics. Hope we discussed, right?
So parameter is population.
Yes,
Statistics is sample.
beautiful, fantastic. So the characteristics of the population, if you express in a like some number or a metric, then we call it the parameter. Similarly, whatever you calculate using the sample data, we call it statistics. In order to understand the population, we always look at two things. One is central tendency, another one is variation. And in central tendency, most of the time we use average, and then in variation, we use standard deviation. So this average and standard deviation
One
are
second.
called
Can I-
the parameters.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
One second, small thing, because timely I just wanted to make. Somebody was saying that population parameter, very good. Always remember P cube. Always you should say population parameter, and it is permanent, right? Okay, thank you very much. It will never change.
Why it is
Parameters.
Q? Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
You said something PQ. Why it is Q?
Three P's are there. P for parameter, P for population, P for permanent.
Oh,
The
three
values are
Ps,
permanent.
right? Okay, I got it. 3 Ps.
Right. Thank you.
So there are certain tests for your parameters. There are certain testing you can do to understand your parameter. Those are called parametric test. What are those parameters? It can be mean, it can be proportion, it can be standard deviation, it can be variance, ultimately the central tendency and the variation. These are called parametric test. There are several testing falls under the category: Z test, T test, ANOVA, chi-square, and so many things. Suppose if your distribution is skewed, right? The tail, get lengthened one side and shortened the other side. And now your distribution is not perfectly normal, or it is not at all normal. So it might start demonstrating a different behavior. It could be some other distribution, it could be variable, it could be gamma, or it could be some other forms of distribution. Under such situation, your same average, the same variance may not help you to understand the behavior of your process. Hope all of you understand the point. So instead of looking at the parameters, the normal average and the variance or standard deviation, now is the time we will look at the non-parametric data. For example, median. Median is also a measure of central tendency, but it is non-parametric. So there are certain testing you can do to test the non-parametric measures. So those testings are called non-parametric test. Hope it is clear. What is parametric test and what is non-parametric test? We will try to understand deeper about each and every. Yes. Okay, Jay Kishore, is there anything you wanted to speak?
No, sir, it's okay.
Okay. So what is hypothesis testing? It is a statistical decision-making procedure by which a claim about a population parameter is tested for its trueness using sample data. I just collect a sample, calculate some statistics, and using the statistics, I wanted to judge about the parameter. I take a sample, I calculate X bar. What is X bar? X bar is average. And using the X bar, I want to understand about mu. What is mu? The population mean. Population mean is a parameter, but sample mean is a statistics. I use the statistics to predict a population parameter. Now, this is an inferential statistics. This is an inferential statistics. The sample helps me to understand the behavior of a population. If that behavior is of parametric type, then your hypothesis testing is parametric test. If it is a non-parametric one, then it is called non-parametric hypothesis testing. But generally, We use it for mostly for average, and so the word parameter is used here. So a statistical hypothesis test is a method of statistical inference. An alternative hypothesis is proposed for the distribution of the data, right? Explicitly or informally. The comparison of the two models is deemed statistically significant, right? According to a threshold probability. See, you need to understand what we are discussing is statistics and not mathematics. Mathematics talks about equality and statistics talks about inequality. Anything you arrive using statistics, there will be an inequality. You can never be 100% confident. You can never be 100% confident. If you are 100% confident, then what you are doing is mathematics and not statistics. So if you are 95% confidence, then that 5% is your significance. This 5% is your significance. So this is why we always understand the significance in our study. When my significance is 5%, then the confidence level in my decision is 95%. So there is a relationship between your significance and the confidence you are gaining out of the study. When I sum up, that equals 100%, right? So the significance level, what is significance level? The data would be unlikely to occur. That means the significance level is what you have seen in your sampling may not occur, or what you have not seen in the sampling may occur if you repeat the study. There is a probability for that. What you see is not always the fact. You did an experiment, you are seeing something, but what you see may be a fact or may not be a fact. There is a probability that what you see, can be a fact. And so there is also a probability that what you have seen may not be a fact. All of you are with me on this, what I'm talking, right? So you have seen something and you will be tempted to believe it. And now there are two probability comes into picture. One says, this is the probability that what you have seen can be a fact. On the other side, one more thing comes. There is a probability that what you have seen may not be a fact. When I add these two probability, how much it will be? 100%. Am I right? One side, the probability of the fact, and other side is probability that it may not be a fact. So when I add together, it is 100. So what is my interest is, I wanted to understand the risk involved in my decision. What is the risk component? The fact component is my risk, or the opposite one is my risk? Can somebody tell me? What is the risk here?
Not fact.
What I am seeing is not a fact. That is the risk involved. I wanted to measure the risk. In order to measure that risk, I use a tool called p-value, probability of significance. I always wanted to see that my risk component is less than the level of significance in my study. The risk component should be less than the level of significance in my study. What is the level of significance? The permissible amount of risk. Clear? The permissible amount of risk. Because you cannot avoid the risk, there is a guideline. You fix it before commencing the study. You can fix it as 1%, you can fix it as 5%, you can fix it as 10%, and you can fix it as whatever you want. But general industry standard is 5%. That means if you use a data and make a conclusion, the risk associated, the risk of uncertainty, the risk of randomness is 5%. This is called alpha, level of significance. All of you understand what is alpha, what is level of significance?
Yes, sir.
And then I will also estimate the risk. After collecting the data, I will estimate with the help of a data. When I estimate, that is called a p-value, probability of significance. this probability of significance should be less than the permissible level. Should be less than permissible level. If it is less than permissible level, I will believe the data. I will believe the data and consider that my data speaks the fact. Otherwise, I will temporarily ignore my study and look for the alternative. Right? This is how you must take the decision. So the process of distinguishing between null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis is aided by considering two types of errors. One is type 1 error. What is type 1 error? My null hypothesis is rejected, but actually it is true. And the other one, my alternate, the opposite one, my null hypothesis is false, but I accepted. That is type 2 error. We'll do this, right? So we wanted to control both. So I think we already talked about p-value. So the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis is a function of 5 factor. Your p-value is a function of 5 factor. Whether the test is one-tailed test or two-tailed test. That is one thing you need to understand. What is one-tailed? And you check only one side. Your tolerance is critical only on one side. If the tolerance is critical on both sides, then it is called two-tailed. If the tolerance is critical on the right side, then it is right-tailed. If the tolerance is critical on the left side, then it is left-tailed. So one thing is whether your test is one-tailed or two-tailed, and level of significance. What is level of significance? The permissible risk. That is called the level of significance. Generally, it is 5%. 5% means 0.05. And the standard deviation in your data. The variation in your data. Always you take decision by collecting an amount of data. Let's say you collect 100 data. The 100 data will have a standard deviation. More the standard deviation, more will be the risk. Less the standard deviation, less will be the risk, right? So standard deviation is also playing an important role. And the amount of deviation from the null hypothesis you wanted to validate. Amount of deviation from the null hypothesis which you wanted to validate, and the number of observation. What is number of observation? Sample size. So all these things are related. If you increase the sample size, then it will, your standard deviation might go down. More the sample, your standard deviation can go down. So that is why optimum sample size is required in order to control all these things, and we will discuss. So what is now null hypothesis? So null hypothesis is the initial claim specified using a common knowledge, or what we have been believing so far is the null hypothesis. What we have been believing so far is the null hypothesis. Imagine in your company, you purchased 10 machines which are identical. That means the make, specification, everything is same. What do you believe about the machine? When I use the 10 machines, all 10 machines will give me the same result. That is your belief. Am I right? Yes or no? I purchased 10 machines and I strongly believe that all 10 machines will give me the same output, same performance. Now, what is this statement? This statement is null hypothesis. Everybody will believe your statement. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Suppose you wanted to argue, you wanted to say the machine number 9 is not as per the spec. And you are saying that you are mentioning that. When you say that machine number 9 is no more good to produce as per the spec, do you think immediately people will believe and then scrap that machine number 9? Come on, please. Now you wanted to definitely people won't agree with you. What they will ask? They will ask you some data, evidence, isn't it? Why are you talking like that? To prove. How can I scrap my machine? The machine is 45 lakhs. But now suddenly you are saying it's out of order, and then it is no more worth to use it for production. So you want me to scrap? Then prove it. Then only I will scrap it. So now the first belief that all the machines are equal, that is null hypothesis. One of the machine is not equal, that is alternate hypothesis. So null hypothesis need not be proved. It is the belief. Alternate hypothesis requires a data, and then only alternate hypothesis will be considered for investigation. I don't use the word accepted. I use the word considered for investigation. I will take it up as a next level of investigation, a research, maybe design of experiments. So null hypothesis is the initial claim specified using common knowledge. It is the statement of innocence. When I buy 10 machines, all 10 machines should be same. That's an innocence, but still it can be different. But generally people believe. There are 20 people attending the black belt training program. What we sincerely believe is, we believe that all 20 of you, put equal efforts. But the fact may not be, may be different. So null hypothesis is a statement of innocence. It is a statement of equality. I would say it is a statement of no change before the conditions before the process improvement and conditions after the process improvement are same. It's a statement of no change. It's a statement of no difference. This is how you must frame null hypothesis. We always assume null hypothesis to be true unless and until we get a clue that it is, it is wrong. Otherwise, we always believe, right? Hope it is clear. And alternate hypothesis, the just opposite. Statement you may believe or hope to prove as a researcher. Everybody says, believe that all 10 machines are same. But you only wanted to prove that the 9th machine cannot produce as per the spec. So your statement, the researcher statement, is the alternate hypothesis. So it is valid. Your statement will be valid only when all others drop their opinion. Am I right? You will be able to make changes only when you convince all others in your company. Only when all others they drop their idea. That means you must make them reject their null hypothesis. You must make them reject their null hypothesis, and that alternate hypothesis is called research hypothesis, right? So, right. Give me a minute. I'll come again. Yes. So it is hypothesis testing is a decision-making procedure in which a claim about a population is tested for its trueness, right? Using statistical procedure. And say, for example, you have a device which consumes energy, maybe electrical energy, and your maybe a heater or something, and your heater comes with two variant available depending on the damper. One is electrical damper, another one is thermal damper. So there are two types, and your brainstorming discussion and experts' opinion, they're all telling that damper type is responsible for the energy consumption. That means if you use a particular damper, then it will consume more energy. So now this creates a situation for hypothesis testing, because so far while designing your heater, you never thought the damper could impact the efficiency. But now, after brainstorming, people are telling that the damper type could impact the energy consumption. And so you need to check whether the electrical damper is consuming more energy or thermal damper is consuming more energy. And now you need to make a statement. First statement is null hypothesis. The energy consumed by electrical damper or energy consumed by your heater or device with the electrical damper is equal to the energy consumed for the device with the thermal damper. Energy consumed with the electrical damper is equal to energy consumed with energy consumption with thermal damper. When I say equal to, what is this statement? Is it null or alternate?
Null.
Null statement.
Null.
Very good. This is null hypothesis. This is where most of the researchers go wrong. Right. So null hypothesis, the first step you must frame. Now, the reaction time affects the chemical process yield. Reaction time, if it changes, then chemical process yield will change. This is the expert's opinion. Now, how will you frame a null hypothesis for the second case? How will you frame?
A change in the reaction time
Equals.
varies the process yield.
Change in the reaction time varies the process yield. Is it a null hypothesis or an alternate hypothesis?
It is a null hypothesis because you are equating the change in time to change in the yield.
You are not equating. You are saying that you are making a statement of inequality. That means, when I change the reaction time, my yield will change. You are saying that when I change the reaction time, maybe reaction time I have two levels. One is low level, another one is high level. When the reaction time is low, my yield is 70%. When the reaction time is high, my yield, 80%. Now, do you understand your yield is now increasing? Right? So now this is a statement of inequality. The statement of inequality is alternative hypothesis. So remove the inequality, put the equality to see your null hypothesis. Is that clear? Yield when the reaction time is maintained at low is equal to the yield when the reaction time is maintained at high. Now, what is the statement I am saying? This is null hypothesis. I brought the equality inside. Very good. Now, pouring temperature affects the casting strength. Maybe your aluminum casting should have a particular compressive strength. And your experts are suddenly telling, hello, your pouring temperature also needs to be looked at. You can't pour your metal at whatever temperature you have. You should always pour the metal at a particular temperature only. And now our discussion is going in that direction. Now, what is the null hypothesis? The compressive strength or the strength of my casting, right, at different pouring temperature. Pouring temperature is low, pouring temperature is medium, pouring temperature is high. Whatever pouring temperature, the compressive strength or the casting strength is equal. What is this statement?
Null.
Null. When I say equal, what I am trying to say in real time, I am trying to say that pouring temperature doesn't affect your casting strength. Am I correct? Pouring temperature doesn't affect your casting. That is why you have never thought of optimizing it. Am I right? You have been pouring it at whatever temperature you have. You simply ignored it. Why? Because your belief is it doesn't impact the strength of the material. Now, feed rate, the rate at which you feed your cutting tool affects the surface finish. What is your null statement here? What is the null statement?
Feed rate won't affect the surface finish.
Beautiful. Feed rate will not affect the surface finish. So you feed at whatever rate you want. Your result is always same. Surface finish when at feed rate low, surface finish at the feed rate medium, surface finish at feed rate high, all will be equal. That statement is null hypothesis. Hope it is very clear to all of you how to frame null hypothesis and how to frame alternate hypothesis. When somebody talks to you, makes a claim, just to check whether he is talking about equality or he is talking about inequality. If he is talking about equality, then his statement is null as it is. When he is talking about inequality, then his statement is alternate hypothesis. Now I want to say, Alok Nanda, participation is better than anyone else. Now what is this statement? Null hypothesis or alternate hypothesis?
Alternate hypothesis.
Alternate.
This is alternate hypothesis. And all your participations are same, equal. Everybody participate in the same level. This is null hypothesis. Very good. So you can use this hypothesis testing to validate any claim when you are running a DMAC project in your organization. Okay, you are seeing the team captains, Indian team and the Pakistan team. So what is that? All our Indians want to happen. All our Indians or Indians team, Indians, we believe that Indian team is better. Am I right? Now, when I believe Indian team is better than Pakistan team, what is my statement? Is it a null statement or alternate statement?
Alternate.
Alternate hypothesis. We use null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis in every day in our life, right? Alternate hypothesis is always represented by the symbol H1. You can see that. H1 or sometimes HA. And when you go to Pakistan, and all the Pakistani will believe that Pakistan team is better. And for them, it is alternate hypothesis. And now there comes a neutral body, ICC, International Council of Cricket. Now, what is their statement? They will simply say that you are equal. You are equal. Am I right? So, in order to break the equality, they will conduct a match between India and Pakistan, and then the award can be given. And then the trophy can be given. Am I right? So, they conduct a match. That match is called hypothesis testing. Each team will be allowed to play under similar condition. They will play, let's say, 120 balls, and this team will also play 120 balls. And then if their performance is significantly better, you can make a conclusion that Indian team is better than Pakistan. Am I right? This is called hypothesis testing. Do one small test. Do one small study to break your equality. Conduct just one match to break your equality. That is called hypothesis testing. But you conduct a big tournament. You conduct a big tournament to conclude that you are the world champion. That is called design of experiments. Clear? I just do a small study to understand the criticality. That is hypothesis testing. But I do an extensive study to optimize my X variable so that the solution can be believed as the solution for at least for next 5 years. That is called design of experiments. So null is the statement everyone believes, and hence we don't have to do any study to believe the null. But for alternate, only the researcher believes, only the project leader and then the process owner believes, and hence he has to prove it using data to get the null hypothesis rejected in the organization. Why you must get the null hypothesis rejected in the organization? Then only organization will support you with the change. You become the change agent. Otherwise, you will keep on shouting and nobody will listen to you. So this we discussed. Now, test of mean. What is test of mean? All of you know mean, right? Mean is average. Now, let me go to one more example and then come to the statistical part. All of you know Maggie, right? And Maggie was banned in the year 2015. Hope the history is known. Am I right? Why it was banned? Because there are two problems. One is with the lead content, another one is with monosodium glutamate. Both of them are there is a food safety regulation, and monosodium glutamate should not be added, right? And you can see that is printed in the bag also. I think no MSG present. You can see no MSG present, but actually a food inspector called Sanjay Singh, he did a study and then understood that MSG is present in all the Maggi packets. MSG is present in all the Maggi packets. Now tell me how Sanjay Singh came to know about it, that every Maggi packet contains the MSG. Did he study all the Maggi packets in the market? Several thousand tons of Maggi?
No.
So he must have taken a sample.
Must have taken a sample. How many sample? Suppose if you are like Sanjay Singh, how many samples you will study?
10.
And will you be able to make a conclusion about several thousand tons of Maggi packets that are sold in the market just by studying your 10 samples?
No. From various means
You would have taken from different stores or different batch.
Yes. Okay. You might tighten your sampling study and maybe different batches, different things. But anyway, you will stick to the samples only, because you can't do the full audit. You can't do the full audit because doing full audit is never a great idea, because there is a cost involved, time involved, and you can't really do that. So you will always take a sample and then conclude on the population. This is what Sanjay Singh also did. And this is an inferential statistics. He took a sample of Maggi packet from a retail market. That means it's a random sampling. It's a random sampling. And then he sent it to lab and seen that MSG is present in all the 10. If it is present in only one of the Maggi packet, then he can consider, okay, this may be a mistake, because 9 packets are okay. But all the 10 having MSG, gives a strong clue. Am I correct? How come all the 10 samples can have a deviation? So this 10 sample itself is giving you a lot of confidence to conclude on the population, right? And one thing is that, and similarly lead content also checked to be more than several times more than the prescribed level. So lead content is a continuous data. Am I correct? Lead content is a continuous data. And lead content also is more than the prescribed level. Prescribed level is something, but it is more than the prescribed level. And so Maggi must be banned, and Maggi was banned actually. As a result, 38,000 tons of Maggi packets were burned across 11 cement factories in the country. It's not a small amount, right? Maggi itself executed the process. They burnt all their Maggi packets, not just a few kgs. How much it is? 38,000 tons of Maggi packet. The decision-making procedure behind the banning of Maggi is an hypothesis testing. Am I correct? The decision is arrived to ban the Maggi, and the whole procedure followed is a hypothesis testing. You know what is the hypothesis testing they followed? They followed
All Maggi having lead content and
yes, it is having lead content, and the name of the study is one sample t-test. What is that? One sample t-test, because a sample is used to conclude on the population. A sample is used to conclude on the population. And what is that measured? You measured lead content, and lead content is a continuous data. Lead content is a continuous data. That means the decision-making variable is a continuous data. Decision-making variable is continuous data, and a sample is used to predict on the whole population. And so the study is one sample t-test. And now, if you are the food inspector, tell me, what do you know about the population? If you are the food inspector, tell me, what do you actually know about the population? Something that is printed on the product. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Something that is printed on the product. Only that is known to you. What is the history of the population is not known to you. What is history? History is known if the population data is available. On an average, a human being in India will live about 80 years, right? Can live about 80 years. How do I make this statement? Some data is available. And I also can give some plus or minus. How do I give plus or minus? Because again the data is available, I can calculate the standard deviation. If the data is available, if the central tendency is available, you can expect something to happen. If the data is available and standard deviation is available, you can identify your confidence limits. On an average, a human being might live 80 plus or minus 20 years. Is it clear? I'm closer to the reality. 80 plus or minus 20 years, the life for a human being in India. Is my statement good? Sounds good? Can I get a yes?
Yes.
Yes. Where from I got the 80? Average. How do I get plus or minus 20? That is
The deviation.
based on the standard deviation of my data. Such average and such standard deviation will not be available to the food inspector. Am I right?
Yes.
And so he has to go for one sample t-test. If such informations are available, if the food inspector is given access to such information, then you must prefer to do one sample z-test. Is it clear when to go for z-test and when to go for t-test? If your wife prepares the breakfast, then you will eat in your house. If there is no breakfast prepared, I will order from Swiggy or Zomato. That's how we do, isn't it? But anyway, I'm getting the breakfast, but it may not be as perfect as how my wife cooks. Am I correct or not? Similarly,
Yeah.
if the population information is available, I will try to be accurate using which, so I will conduct z-test. But if the population information is not available, I will go for one sample t-test. And now again considering the Sanjay Singh, he took, let us say, 20 sample of Maggi packets. 20 sample of Maggi packets. All 20 samples sent to the lab and 20 readings comes to him. How many readings? 20 readings comes to him. And now he is taking a decision to file a case against Maggi. Right? He's going to put a petition. And for that, how will he use the data? Will he file a petition based on one single data or based on the average calculated from the data? Hopefully, we calculate average, isn't it? So whenever you make use of the average to arrive on your decision, this is called test of mean. This is called test of mean. Average is used and my decision making variable is continuous, and then my population standard deviation is not known. I only know what is written on the packet. What is written on the packet is the expectation. That's the average. And that also I don't have data, but I just have to accept it. Only a standard value, a reference value is available. So under such situation, I will go for one sample t-test. However, when I am given access to go inside the company and use the data available in the company, I will go for one sample z-test, because that will be more accurate than the t-test, because statistics is always inequality. You must reduce the risk by all possible ways. Wherever there is an opportunity to do a z-test, please do it. If z-test cannot be done, then only you must use t-test. Hope the case is clearly understood, right?
Sir, in food industry, before concluding, you have to go for different batches because particular batch may contain, they will come back. So he went for 5 or 6 stores and saw that, different batches.
You're right. You're right. And always know your sample should truly represent the population. The sample should truly represent the population. I believe RK sir could have taught you sampling techniques. Am I correct? What is the sampling technique that can help you to better understand your population? Is there a ready-made solution available? No ready-made solution exists for any problem. You must thoroughly understand the situation and then come out with a sampling plan. You mix up everything. You need to be random, you need to be systematic, you need to create status, isn't it? You do everything and then make your sample better speak about the reality. But your point is, yes, I must take data from all the batches. That is a stratified sampling. That is a stratified sampling. I collect data from every strata, every batch, but I will randomize my selection because I don't want to be biased, isn't it? While collecting the sample. So we should always think of creating our own tool to better derive the result. So mix of the techniques will help you make your sample better represent the population. But very good point. All right. So there are 4 types of